In the middle of winter, on a night when even the stars seemed silent, a boy who hadn't spoken in almost a year found a dying dog in the snow. What happened next would change both of them. Forever. This is the story of a child's pain, a dog's trauma, and the silent bond that saved them both. Stay until the end, because this story doesn't just warm your heart, it heals it. The wind howled outside like a wild animal, hurling snow against the windows with furious strength. Inside the old farmhouse, the walls creaked and groaned with each gust, but the boy at the window didn't flinch. Liam sat still, small and pale in his oversized hoodie, watching the storm through the frost-covered glass. His breath fogged the pain in slow, steady puffs. He hadn't spoken in almost a year, not a single word, not since the accident. Behind him, the muffled hum of the television and the soft clink of dishes in the sink marked the rhythm of the house. His mother hummed absently in the kitchen, the sound forced, like she was trying to convince the air that things were normal. His younger sister babbled to herself on the living room rug, stacking wooden blocks with names she couldn't yet spell. But Liam didn't move. He was listening. Not to the people in the house. He was listening to the wind, to something deeper, something calling. That's when he saw it. At first, it was just a flicker, a shape between the trees at the edge of the property. It moved like a shadow dragged low to the ground, stumbling through knee-deep snow. Liam pressed his face closer to the glass, squinting. Another flash of movement, a lurching gait, then a fall. The shape collapsed beneath the old oak tree. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He stared. The snow was falling hard now, erasing edges and blurring lines. Soon, whatever was out there would vanish completely beneath the white. He turned, eyes scanning the hallway. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. Quiet as breath, Liam slipped on his coat. He didn't bother with boots. His old sneakers would have to do. He tugged his scarf down from the hook. It was his father's. Navy blue and thick knit. It still smelled faintly of smoke and pine. He wrapped it around his neck and quietly opened the back door. The cold hit him like a slap. Wind pushed against his tiny frame as he trudged into the blizzard, each step a battle against snow and fear. But something in him knew. He had to reach the shadow. By the time he made it to the tree, his socks were soaked through, and his fingers had turned numb inside his sleeves. But he didn't stop. He dropped to his knees in the snow beside the shape. It was a dog. A German shepherd, large and powerful even while collapsed. Its coat was soaked, matted with ice and something darker, blood. One of its front legs was twisted unnaturally. There were scars visible through the fur, old and new. This wasn't a house pet that had just wandered too far. This was a soul that had been through something. Liam reached out slowly, his hand trembling. The dog didn't move. He pressed his fingers to the animal's side. For a moment, nothing. Then, a shudder, a shallow, wheezing breath. Alive. Tears sprang to Liam's eyes, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming flood of emotion. The dog was dying, out here, alone, forgotten, just like him. With a grunt of effort, Liam tugged the scarf from his neck and wrapped it around the dog's chest, trying to stem the bleeding. His small hands worked quickly, instinctively, as if some ancient knowledge guided him. "You can't die," he whispered. It was the first thing he had said in 343 days. "You found me," he murmured, voice cracking. "So I'll save you." The dog's ear twitched. A breath wheezed out through its cracked nose. Somewhere deep within the blizzard, a fragile thread had formed, a connection between two broken beings. Liam didn't know the dog's name. He didn't know if it would survive the night. But in that moment, under the tree where the world stood still, Neither of them was alone anymore. Liam's arms ached. His knees were wet and numb from crawling. But he didn't stop. Not even when the screen door banged shut behind him, or when the kitchen light flicked on for a second, then off again. The scarf, his father's scarf, was looped under the dog's chest, and Liam was pulling with every ounce of strength his small body had. The dog was heavy, too heavy. But somehow, inch by inch, he got it inside. Through the mudroom, up the narrow staircase, past the bedroom where his mother hummed lullabies for a little girl who would soon sleep. Every floorboard creaked like thunder in Liam's ears, but no one came. No one asked. No one saw. The attic door groaned open. Cold air greeted him, but it was nothing like the storm outside. The attic was dust-filled, the windows fogged and cracked, and boxes stacked like silent tombstones. But to Liam, this place was sacred. This was where he and his dad used to build cardboard spaceships. Where secrets were safe and sound didn't matter. The dog, barely conscious, let out a whimper as Liam dragged it onto a tattered quilt left behind from when the attic had once been a playroom. "It's okay," Liam whispered, his voice dry from disuse. "You're here now." The dog didn't answer, but it didn't try to move either. Liam sat beside it, legs crossed, watching its ribs rise and fall, uneven, strained. There was a gash on its side that oozed slowly through the scarf. Its paws were raw, and a back leg trembled in a way that made Liam look away. But the eyes, when they fluttered open, were deep and brown and so human it hurt. "I'm gonna call you Bruno," Liam said softly. The dog blinked. Liam wasn't sure it understood, but the name felt right, strong, solid, like something that could survive a storm. He got up and pulled down the old space heater from the closet. He wasn't supposed to use it alone, but rules didn't matter now. He turned it on and aimed it toward Bruno's shaking body. Then he crept down the stairs, barefoot, moving like a shadow, and snuck into the kitchen. He grabbed a bowl from the counter, filled it with water. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. Then a piece of leftover chicken, 2 slices of ham, the cat's old medicine dropper, gauze, rubbing alcohol. Back in the attic, he worked by flashlight. He wiped the blood from Bruno's fur, flinching when the dog let out a low growl of pain. "I'm sorry," he said over and over again. "I'm sorry. Please don't go." Each word came easier than the last, like cracking ice. He wrapped the worst of the wounds. He cleaned the blood from Bruno's eyes with a soft corner of the blanket. He placed the bowl of water under the dog's nose and watched it twitch, once, then still. It didn't drink. It was too weak. Liam sat down beside him, hugging his knees to his chest. The storm still raged outside, wind screaming against the roof like it was trying to take the house with it. But up here in the attic, all was quiet. Bruno let out a breath, a deep one, slow. Liam held his own breath and leaned in. The dog's eyes opened. For a second, no more, it met Liam's gaze. And then something happened. The tail moved, only an inch, maybe less, but it moved. Liam smiled, a real smile, wide and aching. The kind he hadn't known he still remembered how to make. "You're safe now," he said. "I'll keep you safe." He lay down beside Bruno, one hand resting gently on the thick fur of the dog's shoulder. The warmth from the space heater hummed beside them. Outside, the snow continued to fall. It would cover the tracks by morning, erase every sign that a boy had carried a dog through the storm. But in the attic, where pain met silence and silence met love, something had begun, something that would never be erased. The attic was quiet except for the soft whir of the old space heater and the wind murmuring through the cracks in the window panes. Liam lay curled beside Bruno, his small hand resting on the dog's back, feeling the rise and fall of each breath. He hadn't meant to fall asleep, but exhaustion had pulled him under like a heavy blanket, and when he opened his eyes again, the attic felt different. Still. Too still. The heater's red light still glowed, casting long shadows across the sloped ceiling. Liam sat up slowly, blinking, disoriented. His hand was still on Bruno's fur, but something was wrong. It wasn't rising. Liam's breath caught. He leaned closer, placing his ear to the dog's chest. Nothing. Not the faint rhythm he had fallen asleep listening to, not even a wheeze. Just silence. "No," he whispered, frozen. "No, no, no." He shook Bruno gently. Nothing. His palms pressed against the dog's side. Still nothing. "Please wake up," Liam said louder, his voice breaking. "Please wake up, Bruno!" He pressed both hands to the dog's ribs and pushed, clumsily mimicking what he had seen once on TV. He did it again and again. Panic rising, tears falling hot and fast down his cheeks. "I didn't mean to sleep. I didn't mean to leave you. Please don't go, Bruno." The words ripped out of him like thunder. It was the loudest sound Liam had made in a year, and it shattered the house. Downstairs, his mother dropped a mug in the kitchen. The crash echoed through the floorboards. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. A door slammed. But Liam didn't hear any of it. He was bent over Bruno, sobbing now, his fists clenched in the thick fur, pleading over and over again. "Don't die. Please don't die. I just got you. I'm not ready to let you go." The attic door burst open. A rectangle of hallway light spilled into the darkness. His mother stood there, panting, wide-eyed. "Liam?" He turned, face streaked with tears, eyes wild. "He's not breathing!" he cried. "He was breathing, and now he's not! Mom, help him, please!" It took her a second to process what she was seeing. Her son, silent for almost a year, was shouting, begging, kneeling beside a massive dog she hadn't even known existed. She crossed the attic in 2 steps, dropping to her knees beside him. "Oh my God." She touched the dog's chest, then its nose. "He's cold," she whispered. Liam couldn't breathe. His body shook. "Do something!" Her instincts kicked in. She grabbed the flashlight and turned it toward Bruno's face. His tongue lolled to the side. His eyes were closed. But there, a twitch, a flutter of the eyelid, a gasp, so faint it sounded like wind. "Liam," she said sharply. "He's not gone. He's still fighting." She wrapped her arms around Bruno's front legs. "Help me! Get his back! Gently!" Liam moved without hesitation. Together they lifted the limp body. Down the attic stairs, one careful step at a time, through the hallway, past the wide-eyed little sister peeking from behind the door. By the time they reached the car, Liam's mother had called the emergency vet. Bruno's breath came once every 15 seconds, barely there. Liam climbed into the back seat and pulled Bruno's head into his lap. The dog's fur was damp and sticky. His own clothes were soaked in sweat and fear. He stroked the dog's face, whispering words he didn't know he still had. "You're not allowed to go. You came for me. I won't let you leave." The car sped through the snow-covered roads. Red traffic lights turned green as they neared. The world seemed to move for them, just this once. Bruno didn't open his eyes, but as Liam pressed his face into the dog's neck, he felt it. A single heartbeat. Weak, fluttering, like a moth's wing, but real. Still here, still trying. The waiting room was too bright. Liam sat curled in a stiff plastic chair, clutching the hem of his hoodie between his fingers. His mother sat beside him, one hand on his knee, the other nervously tapping the armrest. Neither of them spoke. Across the room, a receptionist smiled kindly but said nothing as she typed something into a computer. Christmas music played faintly from a speaker overhead, too cheerful, too wrong. Through the swinging double doors behind the counter, Bruno was being worked on. IVs, oxygen, heat pads, emergency fluids. The vet had said the word critical 3 times, and once softly, "Miracle." Liam stared at the floor, where his wet socks had left faint prints on the tile. He didn't care that he was cold. He didn't care that people stared when they walked in. All he cared about was the warm weight that had rested against him in the car, the slow flutter of life that still lingered in Bruno's chest. A door creaked open. A woman in a white coat stepped out. She looked tired, but her eyes were gentle. She walked over and knelt in front of Liam. "You must be Liam," she said softly. "I'm Dr. Keller." Liam nodded once. "Your dog." She paused. "Bruno is stable, for now. We've got him warm, his breathing has steadied. He's still not conscious, but he's fighting." Liam felt something in his chest loosen, just a little. "We gave him pain meds, antibiotics, and fluids. There's a long road ahead, but you saved him. If you'd waited even another hour..." His mother swallowed hard. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Dr. Keller smiled gently. "There's something else." She held up a small scanner. "We found a microchip." Liam's mother blinked. "A chip?" "Yes. Most dogs have them, especially if they've ever had an owner or came from a breeder. It has the animal's ID number and sometimes a registered name." Liam's stomach sank. He didn't know why, but the moment felt dangerous. "I've contacted the registry," Dr. Keller continued. "We're waiting on the owner information." Silence. A long, heavy pause. Liam looked at his mother. Her face had gone pale. "If someone comes forward," the doctor said carefully, "they may have a legal claim." "No," Liam said quietly. Dr. Keller looked at him. "Sweetheart?" "No," he repeated. "He's mine." His voice didn't shake this time. It didn't need to be loud. It was certain. "He chose me." Dr. Keller softened. "And that matters. I promise we'll do everything by the book, but we also care about what's best for the animal. If someone shows up, we'll make sure they're suitable." The door swung again. A vet tech came through, clipboard in hand. "We got a name," she said. "Dog's registered name is Ranger. Owner, Stephen Rayburn." His mother inhaled sharply. "What did you say?" The tech looked up. "Rayburn, from Oak Hollow. Says the dog was trained for security purposes." Liam didn't understand the words, but his mother's face told him everything he needed to know. Her lips tightened. Her eyes turned cold in a way Liam had never seen. "Stephen Rayburn," she whispered. "I know that name." Liam tugged her sleeve. "Mom, who is he?" Her voice was a whisper, meant more for herself than for him. "A man your father once worked with, someone who had dogs, lots of them. Not for love, for guarding scrapyards, for fighting, for control." Dr. Keller stood up slowly. "I was afraid of that. Bruno, Ranger, he has signs of old trauma. Scars on his back, his ribs, even his ears. Some of them are deliberate." Liam's eyes filled. "They hurt him?" Dr. Keller nodded, her tone gentle. "Yes, sweetheart. Someone hurt him, more than once. But he's safe now, and you helped him remember that." Silence fell again. Then Liam stood. He walked slowly to Dr. Keller, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked up at her, eyes shining. "Please don't let them take him." His voice cracked, but it didn't falter. "Please." Dr. Keller crouched again. "I won't promise what I can't control," she said honestly. "But I promise this. You matter in this. What you did matters. And I'll fight for you too." Liam's mother knelt beside them, her arms wrapping around him. "We're not giving him up," she said firmly. "No matter what name someone else gave him. His name is Bruno, and he's our dog now." Through the hallway came the faint sound of a whine. Liam turned toward it instantly. "He's awake," he breathed. The next morning, the snow outside had stopped, but inside Liam's chest, a different kind of storm was brewing. He sat by Bruno's cage in the quiet back corner of the veterinary clinic. The beeping machines were steady now, calm, like shallow waves on a quiet shore. Bruno was still groggy, his body wrapped in bandages, his front leg in a splint. But his eyes were open, watching, trusting. "You remember me," Liam whispered, placing his fingers gently through the cage bars. Bruno shifted his weight, inching his big head closer until it rested against Liam's hand. His tail thumped once, then again. A silent yes. Footsteps approached. Liam looked up to see Dr. Keller, followed closely by his mother and a tall man in a pressed coat with a clipboard in hand. The man had a narrow face, trimmed beard, and cold, clinical eyes. "Liam," his mom said carefully, kneeling beside him. "This man is from animal control. His name is Mr. Darrow. He needs to ask us some questions." Liam's chest tightened. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. Mr. Darrow didn't smile. "We've confirmed the chip belongs to a dog registered as Ranger," he began, his voice flat, official. "The registered owner is Stephen Raburn. He filed a report claiming the dog was stolen." Liam's mother stood taller. "That dog was not stolen. He collapsed in our yard, half dead." Mr. Darrow held up a hand. "I understand, ma'am. And we're not making any accusations, but legally, if the registered owner is verified and the claim is valid..." Liam didn't hear the rest. His pulse roared in his ears. They were going to take Bruno away, back to where the scars came from, back to where he'd learned to flinch at every shadow. Dr. Keller spoke next, voice calm but firm. "I've documented multiple signs of long-term abuse. If Raburn tries to reclaim this dog, he'll have to explain those injuries in court," Mr. Darrow frowned. "If it goes that far..." Liam stood up, slowly, quietly. Everyone turned to him. He looked at Dr. Keller, then at the man with the clipboard, then at Bruno, still watching him, still waiting. Liam's voice came out soft, but clear. "His name is Bruno." Mr. Darrow blinked. "I'm sorry?" "His name," Liam repeated, louder now, "is Bruno." Tears filled his mother's eyes, but she didn't speak. Liam took a step forward, standing between Bruno and the adults. "He came to me. He didn't have a collar. He had blood, ice, old bruises, and he came to me." Dr. Keller stepped back slightly, giving him space. "I stayed up all night with him," Liam said, voice trembling. "I fed him with my hands. I gave him my dad's scarf so he wouldn't die in the snow." His fists clenched. "No one else was there. Just me. And he stayed alive because I stayed. He fought because I did." Mr. Darrow hesitated. "Son, it's not that simple." Liam's voice rose, clear, unshaking. "It is that simple." Silence. Then a soft sound from the cage. Bruno let out a low, steady whine, not of pain, but of solidarity. He struggled to stand on trembling legs, pressing his snout to the bars, eyes locked on Liam. Mr. Darrow looked at the dog, at the boy, at the bond that didn't need explanation. He slowly lowered the clipboard. "I'll submit my findings," he said quietly, "and include my recommendation that this animal not be returned to the original owner. The evidence of trauma combined with the emotional connection observed..." He stopped himself. Sometimes paperwork isn't the full story. Liam's knees buckled slightly from relief. His mother caught him in an embrace so tight he gasped. "You did it," she whispered into his hair. "Oh, sweetheart, you did it." Behind them, Dr. Keller nodded once at Mr. Darrow, and Bruno lay back down, still weak, but peaceful, watching Liam with tired eyes that no longer held fear. It was nearly spring when Bruno came home. The snow had melted into soft mud, the kind that squelched under boots and stained socks. and the air smelled faintly of earth waking up after a long sleep. Liam stood on the porch wearing his new coat, dark green, just like his father's used to be, watching the car pull into the driveway. In the back seat, Bruno sat upright, his ears alert, his cast finally removed, and the light back in his eyes. The clinic had cleared him to go home that morning. His ribs had mended. The gashes were scabbed over. His fur had begun to grow back in soft patches over the scars. He still limped a little. He still winced at sudden noises. But he was coming home. When the door opened, Bruno hesitated. Then he saw Liam, and nothing else mattered. He leapt down, paws thudding on gravel, tail wagging with uneven rhythm as he bolted toward the porch. "Bruno!" Liam cried, running down the steps. They met in the middle of the yard. Boy and dog, two shadows finally reunited in sunlight. Bruno barreled into Liam's chest, nearly knocking him over, licking his face with such eager desperation it made them both laugh. It was the first time Liam had laughed freely since before his father died. Behind them, Liam's mother stood with a hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook, but it was from relief, not fear. She knew. This dog had not just helped her son find his voice. He had helped him come back to life. The days that followed felt like rewinding time and recording over the old, broken memories with new ones. Liam and Bruno were never apart. The backyard became their shared sanctuary. Liam built Bruno a proper doghouse, but the shepherd preferred sleeping in Liam's room, curled up by the bed like a living guardian angel. Each morning, Liam would wake to find Bruno already awake, watching him quietly. "I'm okay," Liam would whisper, rubbing his ears. "You can sleep." But Bruno never did. Not until Liam was safely dressed, fed, and ready to begin the day. At school, Liam began to speak again, first in whispers, then full sentences. He answered questions. He read aloud. He told the story of the night Bruno came from the snow. "No one believed me," he'd say to his classmates. But he did. Bruno believed me, and they listened. Even the kids who once teased him grew quiet when he told the part about screaming in the attic, about how Bruno stopped breathing, about how the dog came back. Because he heard Liam's voice. "He waited," Liam always said. "He came back when he knew I was ready." One evening, not long after Bruno's return, a neighbor knocked on their door. "I saw the dog in your yard," she said hesitantly. "Is that the one from the Robburn yard? The one that used to bark all night?" Liam's mother stepped forward, calm and proud. "Yes," she replied. "That's Bruno, and he's home now." The woman stared a moment longer, then smiled. "Looks like he found where he was meant to be." Time passed. Bruno grew stronger. The limp faded. The nightmares became rare. But some things remained. He never let Liam out of his sight. Not at the bus stop, not at the dinner table, and especially not at night. Sometimes, Liam would wake in the early morning to find Bruno sitting beside his bed, ears perked, eyes sharp. "Guarding the stars again?" Liam would whisper, half asleep. And Bruno, as always, would respond in silence. Just being there, that was enough. One Saturday in April, the family took a trip to the forest near the town's edge. Just the three of them, Liam, his mother, and Bruno. As they hiked through mossy trails and sunlit clearings, Bruno ran ahead and then circled back as if guiding them. At one point, Liam knelt beside a stream to skip stones, and Bruno lay beside him, resting his chin on the boy's knee. "You know," Liam said softly, "I think I saved you." Bruno's ears flicked. "But you saved me more." And for a long moment, the world felt perfectly still. A breeze moved through the trees. A bird sang somewhere overhead, and boy and dog sat together, whole, healed, and home at last. Bruno was once Ranger, a forgotten tool in the hands of a cruel man. Liam was once a silent boy drowning in grief, but neither of them stayed broken. They found each other in the snow, and through pain, cold, and darkness, they chose to hold on. Not because someone told them to, but because sometimes the deepest healing comes not from medicine, but from being seen, being chosen, being loved. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment. Have you ever had an animal save you from something invisible? Tell us your story, because the world needs more of this kind of love.